Okay, so the whole point of this program today was to try and sum up some of the principles and concepts that chiropractic mentoring stands for, one of them being clinical excellence, the other being that a lifetime relationship with a patient is by far and away the most rewarding and valuable way to conduct chiropractic practice. And the skills that are necessary to develop that kind of a practice, unfortunately, I think are not stressed nearly as much as they should be. We certainly don't learn them in school. In fact, you'd have to go outside of chiropractic almost entirely to find this sort of concept really in today's business world. You know, there's certainly people, Jeff Gitomer being one, T. Scott Gross, Positively Outrageous Service. There are certainly people out there talking this way. But unfortunately within chiropractic, the idea it's sort of become all about the numbers and all about the volume and all about the bottom line and how much money are we generating. I like to kind of turn that around and say, wait a minute, if we really do develop a patient-centered business, focusing on what the patients want, and therefore perhaps creating an opportunity through developing trust and understanding and a relationship, we might be able to then provide them with what they actually need. And that's what this is about. So where do all these people fit in? Dr. Perrone, close friend, spent a lot of time, energy, and resources developing some technology that is way bigger than, it's not just a CBP technology at all, though much of that knowledge came from some of the research that's been generated through chiropractic biophysics. However, it stands alone. It's very valuable information. David Markarian has some technology that can help you to document functional when you're, especially if you're a structurally based doctor. I think that's an important thing to be able to do and therefore generate greater value. I don't necessarily think these things are all just about charging more, but rather providing a greater value to the patient experience. I also would say that Dr. Maltby is going to be valuable for all of us to hear in the sense that he's representing the fact that you need to document what you're doing in a way that is going to protect you. It scares me to think of people losing the ability to practice, especially those that are dedicated, honest, chiropractors are trying to do the right thing for people. And by the nature of what we want to offer, we tend to see people over a longer period of time. And even in the instance where we're going to see people over a great length of time in a relationship-based practice, we need to be thinking about how do we document that? How do we make that clinically relevant so that we don't get in trouble? So that's what this is about. The spoken language being the most important diagnostic and therapeutic tool that we have is what this is about. This is one of the skills that is sorely lacking in most instances, in most practices. The other thing that I see often is that organization gets in the way, or there's so much tedium associated with the organization that you have in your practice that the communication is an afterthought. So you first have to be organized enough to answer the phone correctly. Then you can start to gather this information that's vital for you to be able to develop this relationship. So the history, the patient history that we all learned, the OPQRST and the whole 9 yards, really starts when the phone rings. We're going to start building knowledge about the individual who's calling us at that point in time. Prior to meeting the patient for the first time, so in other words, the phone call already occurred, right? The team has to be well schooled in how to gather information in such a way that then they can present that information or hand that off to the doctor or another team member for that matter. So for instance, the phone call comes in to Onken Chiropractic, Robin answers the phone. That critical initial step, that first impression, is huge. It's huge. You know, in the legal profession, they say that you should never ask a question that you don't have the answer to, right? How are they able to do that? Right? Because they do research and they do all kinds of exploration of fact so that it comes across naturally when they ask those questions. They already know what the facts are. So if you can, in a sense, do something similar with gathering from the beginning in this initial phone call, you can start to gather information about who this person is, what's affecting them, why they called you, etc. When you go to meet them for the first time, start the history process, and then, you know, the traditional history process, you've got a lot more horsepower, don't you? We've got to become detectives here. We've got to be able to be in a position to dig past the superficiality that most people have. You know, you've experienced this. You meet somebody, hey, how you doing? Oh, great, everything's fine. You know, my 401k is done and gone, and you know, I just got laid off, but everything's fine. We got to get way past that, in order to get to know someone, to get inside their head, find out what makes them tick, right? And not in a devious way, but in a way that is sincere. You know, getting to know someone so that perhaps, again, you can find out what it is they're really looking for. Down the road, you can provide them what they actually need. When you have a form like this, and I did put a kind of a series of things in the appendix for you to look at, and we can refer to later. You know, when you have a form, something like this, in your office, and the phone rings, and you get this information, this one, of course, is filled out, you have a huge advantage over the person who just wings it. And be honest, how many times are you winging it when a person comes through the door? You're just excited that there's an N in your appointment book or on your computer screen for a new person, right? Great, be excited, but let's put this this kind of information to good use. So this whole series of questions, you know, who referred you? How do you know that person? Do you have a personal website we may visit? Do you have an email address? If somebody has an email address, for instance, that's, you know, Dr. Onken at Onken Chiropractic, is your front desk person trained well enough to go in and gather some information about Dr. Onken, for instance, or john.p@ibm.com, or whatever the case may be? Do you have the resources, or have you trained to go in and explore a little bit about who this person is before you're going to meet them? So I would say, you know, you have to explore their present time feelings, for sure, the fear that they have, and you know this. Patients are afraid in many ways. They don't always verbalize it, but there's definitely a fear factor involved. They also have an expectation, and it's your job to figure out what that is. You also have to explore the past events that they've experienced, the conditions, and most importantly, the emotional connection that these people have with those events. How many of you have read any of the latest information about how we make decisions, process information, right? You know, we don't make decisions based on facts. We make decisions solely on emotion. We justify the decision with facts.